Hello, everybody. If you're catching our broadcast, we're actually going to start in about 5 minutes, but we're allowing the technology to work its magic in the meantime. And we are being brave pioneers in doing this together. I think this is the first two-person Children's Mental Health Ontario endeavor, correct, Kim? This is the first
Absolutely.
time?
We haven't done it this way before.
Right.
Although
So
you and I did a Facebook
something.
video, right? It wasn't live though.
Right. I think it was some kind of, and I think we're all in the same place at the same time, which is kind of a different beast than, trying to glue our households together.
Yes. It was the old way we did things, not the new way we do things, right?
And why would we do anything an old way anymore? It's all about now, sort of.
Well, it is. You know, it's so interesting, right? Like how much of this will just stay and how much, we'll carry with us. It is pretty convenient. I mean, you and I could get together this way very often unless we did it this way, right?
True. And, we're learning all kinds of new skills. Every day I'm figuring out something else not to do on camera. I had a producer tell me the other day that, in certain lighting, you get a reflection off my glasses, which I can see is happening right now. So I'm not going to take them off, or I'll just be a big smudge to myself.
Well, I think that I saw on Twitter before I got on, somebody said they had Zoom eyeballs.
And that's just like from staring at a screen so much.
All day long. Yeah.
Yes. And Karen is asking in the message thing if we can see her message. And Karen, we can see it, but I can't reply to it. So all I can do is, I guess, reply out loud and use the private chat if we have to. But please consider your message acknowledged, Karen.
But I can't see it, just for the record.
Oh, okay. I'm sure this is exciting for people, seeing us figure out the technology in real time. We promise we will be transitioning to actual content in a minute or two, but this is just our, we've invited you into the green room is what we're saying. And you can see my background is kind of greenish. So hi, Jessica, glad you're here too. If nothing else, we have people cheering us on in the background. So Kim, I brought tea. I don't know if you brought tea, but.
Absolutely. I have my special Georgian Bay mug. We had this, my parents used to have a cottage, and these were the mugs we used up at the cottage. So it has a big special meaning for me.
Oh my heavens. Well, I have to show you this, and I'm going to try not to drop the computer, but see up there, there's like a picture of
kind of bend my head. Yeah.
A cottagey kind of picture.
Oh,
my grandma painted that. So that's my sentimental cottagey thing. So it's kind of neat that we both have that connection, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okie doke. So I think we're at 8 o'clock. And my husband, Neil, always says to me, don't start anything right on the second you're supposed to start it. But I always feel like I don't want to waste the time of people who show up on time, right? So I'm having like voices in my head arguing it out right now. And I think we should maybe gently ease into the conversation if you're okay with that, Kim. And that way,
yes,
maybe we could just start out by telling people who the heck we are and why we're having this conversation to start with.
I think that sounds like a very good idea.
Why don't you go first?
All right. So my name is Kim Moran, and I'm the CEO of Children's Mental Health Ontario. And I've been the CEO for just almost 6 years, I think now, a long time. And the reason I decided to do this was because my daughter became very severely mentally ill when she was 11. And the system of services just really wasn't there to catch us as a family. And I really felt that had to change. Now, we're very lucky, because not all parents can say this, but our daughter recovered, and she's 20 now, and she's just finished her second year off of nursing. And so I'm a very proud mama to say that. It didn't have, it could have been another route, though. And there was some very hard years that we all had as a family while she recovered. So it took about 3 years, and we managed to see the services that are out there, or lack thereof, from a number of different vantage points, from experiencing public services, from the mild to the most intense, to hospital services, and private, public, everything in between. And so I think as a parent, I got a good view of what works, what doesn't, and where we have to go. And so the great privilege I have now is to work in this job and help try and make some of those changes happen. So that's me.
Yeah, well, I am so happy that you came into this job, because you not only have, like, the administrative skills required to pull off the job, right? But you have that passion, you have that commitment, you have that connection with families who are living through this right now and knowing how hard it is and how much support they need. And now I'll introduce myself, in case people are wondering, who is this person with the, the wild hair? Well, everybody has wild hair right now, so I feel
I would
very
say so.
Yes. My name is Ann Douglas, and I am a pregnancy and parenting book author. I'm also the weekend parenting columnist for CBC Radio. So for decades of my life, I've either been living parenting or writing about parenting, or, trying to figure out parenting. That continues to be a thing, right? And in recent years, I've been focusing a lot on mental health as well. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Parenting Through the Storm, which was a guide to parenting a child who's struggling with some kind of mental health, neurodevelopmental, or behavioral challenge. And it was based on interviews with 65 families, a number of mental health researchers, clinicians, and so on. And I wrote the book because our family had been through a lot of storms with our kids during their growing up years. And I wanted to sort of bring together the stories of a bunch of parents who had walked this walk, and to get their best advice and wisdom to share with other parents. Because I think the worst feeling you can have as the parent of a child who's struggling is the feeling that it's just your family that's having a hard time. And the statistics tell us completely the opposite, right? Like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, depending on which stat you choose, Canadian kids are struggling with some kind of mental health challenge. So there's a lot of us, and we can support one another, and we can weather these storms together.
Absolutely. I mean, it's 12% of kids actually have a serious mental health issue. And I think that, when you and I talk, and often the parents that we talk with are those families that really have a big struggle, right? Those kids who really have needed long-term help and support. And the statistics are such that, 1 in 5 children, as you said, or 1 in 4, depending on which stat you read, have a mental health issue. And it can go from, quite mild, but still important, to those kids who are very, very seriously ill. And I think that for parents of those kids, it's a hard job.
It is. And I think we've had the privilege of engaging with a lot of families through Children's Mental Health Ontario's various conferences and so on. And when you hear the stories of parents whose lives were completely upended in order to be able to be the parent they needed to be for their child in a time of crisis, I don't think anybody who hasn't been touched by somebody whose life has been upended in that way can realize what a struggle it can be for a family. And a lot of families do get through, and some do not. And just like the point you made right off the top, Kim, I feel like I have to echo that sentiment that yes, one of my children had a particularly scary time, and we're grateful that she's still here. But it's not that I feel like I had any magic secret ingredient of parenting. No. Her story ended a different way than other families who did all the same things, loved their kids just as much, and unfortunately their children are no longer here. And I think about those parents every single day.
Mm-hmm. I do too. And, many of them have shared their stories with me. And those are tough conversations, because every time I think, that could be me. That could have been me, right? Yeah. It just, by whatever luck, right? Or prayer or whatever, it could have been me. And so it always makes me pause and be thankful for my daughter's recovery, right? And also sort of the recognition that recovery is a process, and it may not be that way 2 weeks from now, right?
Yes.
right?
Yes, and speaking of 2 weeks from now, I mean, we are in a time where things are changing so quickly, and I think that it's hard enough to be any parent in this moment, let alone the parent of a child who went into this, like into the pandemic with a serious mental health challenge. So I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about what we're hearing from parents, because we're having a lot of conversations with parents. So maybe we could collectively make a little list of all the different things that parents are thinking about and talking about, and what is making this such a challenging time for parents.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, I think that when a child already has a significant issue that they're dealing with, or the family is dealing with, I should say, I think that this type of pandemic can exacerbate the problem. For some kids, being home and away from sort of some of the stressors of school and things like that, it's actually improving, right? It makes it helps them. But for some kids, it actually goes in the other direction, and family may not be as warm and great a place as other families might be. So what we do know is that we just did a research study, and did some public affairs polling with kids and families. And what we found is that, and it's really not anything you would think wouldn't be true, but we know that kids weren't doing so well with their mental health issues going into this pandemic. We know that the rates of anxiety have doubled for kids between 12 and 18 over the last 20 years. We don't know why, but we know that it has doubled. We know that 1 in 2 children are at high or moderate risk. I'm going to read some of the data, so apologies for my eyes flitting.
That's
but
okay.
I don't have it all memorized. Um, 1 in 2 children are at high or moderate risk of a mental health issue going into the pandemic. Parents said their children were stressed to the point of not coping. That's a pretty strong statement, right?
Yes.
The other stat that really caught my eye, this one, and I'm sure it rings true for you too, Anne, is that 25% of parents said their child felt sad or hopeless for a few weeks or more last year. And it's happening more frequently since the outbreak, 14% said. Now, you know that a child should not feel sad or hopeless for a few weeks. Like, that is a sign of some kid that is really struggling, because sadness and hopelessness should pass, right? Just like with adults, it should pass. So that one caught my eye. And of course, having a child who was depressed at a young age, it made me really think of my daughter sort of curled up on the couch. And she was so ill, she actually couldn't even concentrate on television for a period of time. Now, for an 11-year-old, that's really quite startling. And so my heart went out to those kids, and I'm just hopeful that those parents, we can reach them and say, get help for your child.
Yes. Yeah. And I know I was reading your data today. I printed out all kinds of charts and stuff from your report. It really is good. I mean, it's good in terms of validating the fact that this is a serious problem, and a lot of kids are struggling, and a lot of kids were struggling even before this started. And I think just in terms of some of the conversations I've been having with parents, I've been hosting a whole bunch of different sort of community town halls, some of them private, some of them in a more public forum. And what I'm hearing over and over again are parents feeling massively overloaded and guilty because they can't magically clone themselves and simultaneously be, at work, providing childcare, doing education, meeting all the demands of their life all at once. Like, there just isn't enough capacity to be able to do that. They're being really hard on themselves. They're experiencing huge amounts of work-life conflict. Like, some people now feel like they're living in an office, and they worry about the impact on their child. I mean, I have had so many poignant conversations with parents who are in tears saying, what kind of message am I giving to my kid when I have to keep saying, but mommy has to work, or daddy has to work right now, and I can't stop and play that board game with you. They feel tremendously guilty, and yet it's because they're between a rock and a hard place. I heard something.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit, Anne.
Okay.
I know that The rural internet, I think you said one time.
Yeah, the rural chipmunk powered
but I
internet
think
can
that
be a
what I
challenge.
heard but what I think I heard you say that really rung home is this balancing act that parents are having to do. I mean, I feel actually pretty lucky that my kids are older now, right? And you just saw Lauren walk through the back of the
That's
frame
who
a
it
few minutes
was.
ago. That's who it was. And I don't have to do the same balancing act, which, I can remember though when my kids were younger, and I can't even imagine trying to balance all this. And my colleagues at work, some of them are young, have young kids, and I say to them, you have to be a good parent first. That's the first piece. Then we have to be a good worker. But I know the problem is they're high performers.
Mhm.
So they try and do both really well, and I can feel it. I can see I can see the tension on their faces, and that's very difficult. Now imagine if you are the parent of a child who has a significant need, right? And whether they're, acting out in terms of their anxiety and they become very aggressive. Imagine trying to manage that. Maybe they have siblings, right? And they're getting frustrated and anxious, and you're trying to work. And, when you think about that, the tension in the home starts to skyrocket. And certainly the data says that. I mean, 1 in 3 families are reporting increased tension in their household. And, we always talk about, and I think it's a bit hard for some people to wrap their heads around. I mean, I think parents get it intrinsically, but your children's mental health depends on the state of your nuclear family in a lot of ways, right?
Mhm.
Because kids' mental health issues can be exacerbated or made worse with their parents. I always say that I can tweak my daughter's anxiety with one text. Just give me one text. And I bet you, right, that she would get very fired up, and so as a result, when the family's tension starts to increase, I really worry about those families who are already struggling.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, we all know there's, so much research in the parenting research about how the best way to calm your child is to calm yourself. And yet, in the midst of a pandemic, when you're feeling massively overloaded, sometimes that is definitely much easier said than done. And I mean, some of us are naturally anxious people at the best of times. So a lot of people are talking to me about anxiety and concerns about screen time. And I noticed
Mm.
that in your survey results that screen time is going up in families, and parents are really concerned about that. But it's not a normal time, is it?
You know, No, it's not a normal time. And, I think that, when I've listened to experts, they've said, relax your rules a bit. That is going to
Yeah.
happen. We're stuck in our house. And so I think that parents can relax that. I think the problem is there's going to be some kids where those can be addictive for them.
Mhm.
And so we have to, parents have to be a bit mindful and watchful of that. I've often kind of checked and queried my daughters. I have 2 daughters. Usage of those sorts of things, because sometimes I do think it goes into the too much or the have to kind of stage. But I do think that parents have to give themselves a bit of a break and say, that is going to happen right now. I'm sure it's happening with you yourself, right? That
Oh,
you're
totally.
watching.
Yeah, and some of the best advice I've seen has just been to sort of not fixate as much on the time as what is this tool? If it is now your new
Uh,
way of, connecting with the outside world, then it's probably, not quite your normal situation. And also to help your child to understand or notice how a particular kind of screen activity makes them feel. Do they feel better or worse after they spend an hour doing this thing on the screen?
oh,
And then you can sort of like
I
work
hadn't
through
thought
some,
about that. Yeah.
yeah, because I don't know about you, but there's some activities that I just shouldn't be doing right before bed, or I'm gonna do not read your news feed right before bed. That's the worst thing a person can do. But I have to remind myself that all the time, and I'm 56. I have to relearn that lesson at least once a week.
Well, I do too. My daughter started doing TikTok videos. Have you ever seen TikTok?
Yes,
So
I don't understand it, but I think it's hilarious.
it is hilarious. And so I started watching that just before I was going to bed. And, it's too engrossing. And I found I was staying up too late. So exactly the same, right? As adults, you get sucked into it. And you just keep doing it and keep doing it. So I think you're quite right. I mean, teaching, relaxing the rules somewhat, but still making sure that your kids are happy. I really like that. Happy when they step away, I think is really important. I think the other thing the study said that people ought to think about a little bit is about behavioral changes, right?
Yes.
60% of parents notice behavioral changes in their child. And when I say that, I mean drastic changes. So I'm sure my mood is off a bit. It's not drastic though. So we're really talking about drastic changes. And that's from outbursts or extreme irritability to drastic changes in mood, behavior, personality, and sleeping. So for all of us, so I don't know about you, but sleeping is one of those bellwethers. So I know if I'm feeling too stressed or not, because then I stop sleeping. But that's what we're seeing. 60% of parents report some significant changes. And, sometimes, as that can be a precursor to mental illness. And so those parents need to be kind of vigilant and watch those kids and see what they think. And some of them are going to have to reach out for help. And the thing that I want to make sure that parents understand is, and it wasn't the case when my daughter was this age, but it is the case now, that help is actually very easy to get right now. You can go to CMHW.org and there's a find help page. And you can connect to a child and youth mental health expert by virtually or by telephone across the province. No fees. It doesn't cost any money at all. You don't have to have an OHIP card. You don't need a referral. You just phone. And I think that is for parents who just want to check, is this okay? Right. And I always said, all you want is this a big deal or a little deal? Right. If it's a little deal, as a parent, I can probably with a little bit of help work it out. But if it's a big deal, then I really want to get my child the kind of help they need right away. And the good thing about phoning an expert is they have the army of experts in behind them to help.
Yeah. And you have the experience of maybe knowing, 1, 2, 3, or 4 12-year-olds, whereas they've dealt with, many hundred or thousands of 12-year-olds. So they it's like how you get sort of like that sixth sense as a parent, but they have that multiplied from so many different experiences with so many different kids. By the way, we're getting a million comments here. And I mean,
are we?
Yeah. And I don't think you can see them all. So maybe what I'll do is I'm just going to highlight a few things because I think it's the odd thing people want us to speak to. And you can see, you guys, I'm sorry, Kim and I are still rank amateurs at being, totally hip live. So you're going to have to forgive us for not necessarily, acknowledging you all as you came in. We're really thrilled that you're here. I even got fan mail. That's so lovely. I'll have to screenshot and save that one for my family. But yeah, I think one person said parents really need to be listening to their kids. We're losing too many kids and people to suicide. Yeah. And that somebody else added that it can be so hard for families to know when to reach out and where to reach out. So I'm so happy you were talking about that. Stephanie says there's definitely not enough of her to go around. I agree 100% on that, right? We did have audio glitches. Hopefully we don't now, or reading our lips will be a thrilling exercise for you all. And screen time is okay as long as it's monitored. Yeah, for sure. And somebody else confessed their TikTok addiction.
I was going to start saying I'm bored in the house, but
and all kinds of, kind and generous comments of people pretending that we are in fact live video stars. So yeah, I know we were also thinking we might talk a little bit because we're sort of heading into the home stretch, the last 10 minutes or so of our conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the strategies we're using in our own lives and, that we're seeing other families use to try and cope during this extraordinary time. And I don't know about you, but the other night when we had our chat on Twitter, our Kids Can't Wait Twitter chat, seeing the kindness that people were offering to one another, that was the warmest feeling feeling I've had all week. So yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I'm super lucky in my neighborhood. People live very close together. It's very urban. And so sometimes I'm sure some people who live in the country would be going, oh, they live on top of each other. But in this environment, it's kind of nice to see people. And I have two little dogs, as you know, and so one of the things that keeps me sane is that I walk them, morning and afternoon. Good for me, good for them. And I don't bring phone, I don't bring earbuds, I just listen. Right, I listen to the woodpeckers and I listen to the birds and talk to the people if they're out on the street. And I think that is really helpful to stay grounded. There's little girls running around on their bikes, and they all want to see the dogs, which isn't necessarily safe these days. So I keep saying to them, when things get better, the dogs will play with you. But that keeps me feeling real and grounded, and just listening to nature and the busy neighborhood and all those things. That makes me. There's some structure in my life that's helpful. And to get out of this house, because I get tired of it, is also helpful, and away from the screens for a while. I think that keeps me sane. What about you?
Definitely the walking. I like to say that I'm somebody who loves her ruts. And so I love having the routine of, go for a walk right before lunch, go for a walk right before dinner, just two short walks. They sort of put bookmarks on my day, clear my head. That is so critical to me. So I'd say walking is a huge thing. Just pausing to appreciate nature. I live in a rural area of the province. So right now I can look out the window and see the lake. And it wasn't that long ago that it was snowing. And I thought, well, maybe it's the last time I'll see snow for 6 months. So earlier today. Yeah. So, even just like those little flashes of nature mean a lot for me as well. And forcing myself to go to bed, even if I don't want to, because when I'm really anxious, I want to stay up really late researching. At one point, all those scary COVID-19 stat tracking websites, I had about 9 of them bookmarked. And I have to confess, some of them are still in my browser bar, but I was going through a ritual of going through them all every night. And then wondering why I was having COVID-19 dreams in the middle of the night. So I had to break that habit. And now I literally make myself read a paper book at bedtime because you can't get alerts on your book. And if I get enough sleep, everything else is manageable. If I start trying to get by with 5 or 6 hours of sleep, I get weepy, I get grumpy, I start feeling queasy, the wheels fall off the bus. So I know I'm fortunate enough to have enough control over my life and my situation. And as you said earlier, I don't have 4 young children right now to deal with, all 4 of them having their ADHD and all their issues. I can't even imagine. So I can focus a little bit more on taking care of myself. But like every other caring human on the planet right now, it is work. It is a lot of work every day to manage the emotions. And some days I wake up and I think, like in a soap opera, oh, it was all just a bad dream. No, it was not all just a bad dream. And now I have to wake up and get into the day again. So, and Kim, I see we have a couple more comments here.
Sure.
These people are prolific writers. One person says, life looks different, but it still goes on. It's time to take advantage of what we miss too often. I think that's so true, the living in the moment. Yeah. And one other comment from Karen, who says, I'm getting out of the house so much with my 4-year-old. I'm clocking tons of Fitbit steps. Okay, we just got to do the Fitbit thing there. Yeah. I've never had so much exercise. I also leave my my phone at home when we're out. It's good for both of us. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you know what? I think that that kids need to be outside now, right? That that really helps them, and exercise is good for all of us. And so I have heard about lots of parents. That's sort of the way that they have a structure to the day, And just like you said, your Rets, they make sure that they're taking their children out at certain times in the day because it helps. And it's interesting. My daughter, who's now 20, as I said, she was feeling a little kind of stuck and down. Now, she was writing exams for quite a few weeks, so of course she would be. And her sleep schedule got all mixed up. Certainly glad she's not listening in on this. And as any 20-year-old, I mean, was staying up very late at night. Her mother was getting upset. What I noticed, though, is over the last 2 weeks that she's kind of righted that, or she's trying to. And she started exercising again. And you know what? It started to lift. So she got on her bike. She started to run, which she swore she would never run. But now she's running. I mean, she did have to get very fancy leggings to do that. But that's a whole other story. She looks very good when she runs. And you know what? I noticed her mood lifting quite substantially just because of it. So, I think that it gives you a structure and a routine that's really helpful.
Yeah. And what you said about the exercise, if I started to laugh, it's because I was reading Marina's comment, and she said how they had gone out and bought a trampoline for the kids. And holy cow, if you haven't already bought stock in a trampoline company, you need to do this, because almost every call, parents are talking about running out to get trampolines. So there's your hot stock tip from CMHW today. So.
Well, you know what I saw in our neighborhood is, again, we live pretty close together. Our neighbor has a trampoline, and her kids were bouncing up and down on the trampoline. The kids in the back of them, in the yard that's adjacent in the back, were on the top of their shed. And the two boys were talking, one on the shed, one on the trampoline, talking back and forth. And I thought it was just so funny.
I heard of a parent who her daughter was really, really missing the kid next door. So the mother made a scavenger hunt that they could each do in parallel in their backyards without, of course, breaking any physical distancing stuff. So I thought that was pretty brilliant. Like, parents are incredibly resourceful and creative, eh?
That's very, you know what, I can tell you, I would not have thought of that. That's a great idea, though.
Yeah. And Dana has just pointed out that Dr. Michael Unger, who has actually an excellent recent book on resilience, is pointing out about how some of the strategies we've been talking about tonight actually support resilience. And I think the most important thing I've learned about resilience over the years, in part from reading Dr. Unger's book last summer, was that resilience is very much a product of relationships and community. So it's not like you're born with a little bit of resilience. You develop it over time in the context of support, which kind of brings us full circle to talking, I guess, in our concluding comments a little bit about being that village for parents and kids and everybody who's struggling. And I wanted to say, I think I said this the other night on Twitter, how much I appreciate all the people who are going above and beyond right now to look for ways to reach out and connect with families, because families have never needed other people's support as much as they need it right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I think about some of the families that are experiencing grief, right? Who've lost a grandparent or a parent, as it is, and I worry about them. And, actually, we are arranging for training of therapists across the province in specialized grief therapy. And I'm happy about that, because I want families to be able to rely on these publicly funded services, to have clinicians who are right up to speed with what families are going to need as we go forward over the next number of months.
Yeah. So why don't we both do like a little parting message, and then we'll let our tech goddesses behind the scenes work their magic. And so I just wanted to say my final thing, which is for anybody who's having a really hard time, self-compassion. Be at least as kind to yourself as you would be to a friend who is having a really hard time, and recognize that this is an extraordinary time. I find it really helpful to remind myself I'm doing the best that I can in a really difficult situation, and then just to sit with that thought. So that's the final word from me. And now over to you, Kim, and you can wave people out of the room.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for coming and chatting with us, and thank Anne, always giving me great advice, because I think I'm going to go and sit with those thoughts a few times tonight. because to be honest, I didn't wake up sort of with my normal vim and vigor today, Anne. So that I think that helps me, right? And it sort of honors the fact that we're doing our best. And I think what I want to leave with parents is that, you know, we don't want to pathologize kids' normal worries and anxieties. Those are real human feelings that we all need to share and to work with. And that's what families are there to support each other with. But if you really think that your child may have a problem, that you're concerned about some of the behaviors they're showing, you know, there is help out there. There's child and youth mental health experts that are available. If you go to cmho.org, you'll find help button, and you can press there and you can find people to talk to. And it doesn't have to be your child, because that's really hard to do sometimes. I know, and you know, Anne, it
Yes.
can be you, and you can get advice about, you know, is this normal? Is it not normal? Is it, as I said before, big deal, little deal? And just reach out, because I think it'll make you feel like you know then. And having knowledge and education about mental health issues makes all the difference. So my final words to you are: reach out if you need to. You know your kid the best, more than anybody else, and trust your feelings and your gut. So